remark, after my remark on last night, being always on the right side. This again.
Good morning. Good morning, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Meyer-Landrut. I am the General Director of the European Institute of Romania, and it is my pleasure and my honor to welcome you all to this debate. Our guest speaker is Mr. Nikolaus Meyer-Landrut, European Affairs Advisor of the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, Angela Merkel. And I would like to thank you very much for accepting to participate in this event. I would like also to welcome the presence of the Romanian Presidential Administration, represented here by Mr. Lazar Comănescu, Advisor for Foreign Policy of the President Klaus Iohannis, and the presence of Mr. Ronald Orban, Presidential Advisor for European Affairs. Just a few words about the significance of our debate. Our debate is organized in a period of, let's say, major challenges for the EU, both from inside and outside, a period of multiple and interconnected crises. From economic point of view, for example, economic recovery in EU remains still weak, long-term prospects rather modest. From security point of view, Europe is surrounded by an arc of instability in south and especially in the east. And all these real security challenges impose rapid and effective reactions. Therefore, for a country like Romania, but also for a country like Germany, the scale of these challenges requires to work together and to strengthen what we have built until now. A divided Europe is a weak Europe. Only a united Europe will be able to overcome the challenges we have ahead. I'd like now to give the floor to Mr. Lazar Comănescu. I've announced that he's in his position of Foreign Policy Advisor of the President Klaus Iohannis, but just allow me to mention some points in his professional activity, because I have to mention that the initiative of this debate belongs to Ambassador Comănescu. So Mr. Comănescu, between 2009-2014, was Romanian ambassador in Germany. And I have also to mention that before this period of time, Mr. Comănescu was the head of the Romanian permanent representation to the EU between 2001-2007, and between 1998-2001, head of the Romanian representation to NATO and the EU. And I could continue the list because the activity of Mr. Comănescu is a diplomatic activity for more than 40 years. So thank you very much, Mr. Comănescu, for this initiative, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Professor Dragan. And allow me to start by thanking you for accepting organizing this gathering today, which I find of utmost interest for us here in Romania. As you mentioned yourself, I think that the EU is crossing a very, let's say, tense and dense period where many developments have occurred, some of them raising question marks. And so the need for us here in Romania, and I dare speaking on, let's say, intending to have some knowledge about European affairs, I think that we in Romania still have a lot of need of upgrading our knowledge and understanding of European affairs. And I'm particularly glad that today we have here among us Dr. Nikolaus Meyer-Landrut, who not not only has a very rich experience and knowledge and deep knowledge of European affairs, but I would say, and I hope you'll agree with me, he is also one of the not too many within the European, let's say, Union framework, who have a very important direct contribution to shaping the, what one would say in Dezbatere, Ablauf of the European Union. Just to mention, to give two examples, which are linked to the recent years of the developments. The European Stability Mechanism or the Banking Union. I hope I'm not making a mistake to say that you've been of key importance in those who conceived this mechanism, which helped, in my opinion, the European Union to move ahead, in spite of many speculations about whether Europe is in crisis or not. Well, not to mention as well the fact that there is a well-known saying that every time EU is crossing the crisis, EU is becoming stronger. And I think that we can speak about that in these days as well. I would wonder whether the banking union would have advanced as it did were not this period of crisis. And so I think that there are reasons for keeping optimism in this respect. This is, once again, very much happy to have Dr. Nikolaus Meyer-Landrut here. And I would, if with your permission, also add a, let's say, personal touch of my great pleasure and really honor to have Nikolaus Meyer-Landrut here. You know, in the almost 6 years in my capacity as ambassador to Germany, you may not be surprised that the EU affairs were on the top of my priority lists. And so I have to say it also here, that if I may have been, let's say, a little bit successful in my activity related to the European Union in Berlin, that's to a great extent thanks to Nikolaus Meyer-Landrut. He offered me a very friendly cooperation, not just professional one, but also, well, you agree with me, we developed a personal friendship, and I'm proud of that. With this, I would not go further because I don't want to spend the time, but I want you to take as much as possible advantage of his presence here. He will make some introductory remarks, but don't hesitate. The second part of this gathering, Q&As. And for those of you who may prefer to, for one reason or another, to raise questions in your mother language, sorry. Please don't hesitate. Raise questions in Romanian as well, because there is an interpretation there. Thank you very much. And Nikolaus, please have the floor.
So Dr. Nikolaus Meyer-Landrut, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind invitation, for the kind reception, possibilities to, is this loud enough? Is this working? To discuss with you the current EU affairs, and as both of you introducing have pointed out, we have a lot of challenges ahead, and they are also linked. I thought I would make a relatively short introduction and leave more time to the discussion so that we can perhaps rather address the issues you are most interested in. When I look at the situation of the European Union right now, well, we first have to realize that we have just behind us 1 year of institutional renewing. We are often criticized as member states when the setting up of a new government takes 1 or 2 months. The European Union has the privilege of taking 1 year between the moment when the Parliament is ending its sessions, European Parliament setting up of a new institution, of a new Commission, and starting on the work of the new Commission. That this year is now behind us, and we have a new institutional setup. And it will be interesting to see whether this new institutional setup will actually also produce results and methods and ways of working which are improved compared to the previous periods. We have a new Commission, we have a new President of the European Council, we have the newly elected European Parliament, a new High Representative. But besides the decisions on the different personalities, we have for the first time tried to define during last year something like a common agenda to define what are actually the key policy priorities, and trying to thus also respond for the first time, and I'm interested to see how that works over the next years, something by which we hope that we can concentrate European activity on the key challenges and reduce perhaps a bit of the collateral activities of the institutions and so on in areas which are of less importance, or where member states should have sufficient room for action. Now, when one looks at the wider picture, I think there are three major areas of concern, of activities we need to deal with, and we need to deal with in parallel, and some of them are also interrelated, of course. The first is what Professor you mentioned, is the economy. We have many words for it. We can call it growth, jobs, competitiveness, strengthening the monetary union. We have all sorts of so to say keywords. But when we look at it, I would say there are several dimensions which we have to deal with. First of all, we have to realize that strengthening the economic performance of the European Union will not succeed without strengthening the performance of individual member states. So structural reforms in member states, reforms which lead to growing growth potential, improvement of the national environment is key, and cannot be replaced by activities at the European level. It can be supported, supplemented by activities at the European level, but it cannot be replaced by activities at the European level. So the second point is, what can we do at the European level? And here we really have to think hard how we can make best use of the European instruments. We have to develop, of course, a common market, but we have to look where are the economic opportunities of the future. Where and how do we want our countries and our economies to earn money in the future? We have to look into, so to say, with a big foresight into these areas. For us, the entire development of the digital world is key, and this will require also European legislation, from data protection to other areas, and it is not easy. Many detailed issues, but if we are not able to set up a European framework in which we can develop digital economy, and in which in a digital economy you can actually earn money in Europe, we will have difficulties in competing with other parts of the world. So this is an important part. And then we have the monetary union, which, as Lada said, we have made progress in strengthening it, in setting up new instruments, developing things in the banking sector and in other areas. But the functioning of the monetary union still needs to be improved, and it also needs to be improved as a matter of, as a proof of the fact that politically member states remain and will remain committed to the functioning of the monetary union. This is also a matter of trust, confidence, of our willingness to bring things further. And well, we can, if you're interested, go into that more in depth, but it remains a key challenge, even if the progress is perhaps not always as rapid as individual actors would wish. The second big area, and I say it in this order on purpose, is climate and energy. It's both, and we have to modernize our energy policy. We have to modernize our energy policy in a way that it allows Europe also to make its contribution to the climate agenda, not only because we have the the big conference in Paris at the end of this year. And this also actually, in the first instance, looks as if it is a burden on our economies, but if we do it right, it is also an opportunity for our economies, and it's an opportunity to modernize and to get more efficient in this area. And here also is an area where we will need more and improved European regulation and legislation, not only on the emission trade scheme, but on the wider area of these issues. And then there is the third wide dimension, which you also mentioned, of external challenges. And I would say that the challenge the crisis in Ukraine presents to the European Union is probably one of the biggest crises we have been facing for the last years, and it is something which requires unity within the European Union, but which also requires the European Union to understand and accept that this is not an issue which will go away within a week or over the weekend. What has happened here is changing the environment in a way that we have to deal with it probably for quite some time, and we have to have the steadiness and the willingness to stand these kind of challenges through. And this is of course always more complicated in a complex environment as a European Union than if you are an individual member state or an individual country. So it's a lot of political work required to keep the European Union working together on this issue. I must say, compared to all the media speculation about this question over the last year, European unity has been very good. We have actually, at every individual stage when decisions had to be taken at the European Council, we have reached unanimity on these issues. We have reached it relatively easily. There have been speculations and debates about divisions, but in real terms, the decision-making at the European Council on how the European Union should react and deal with the Ukrainian crisis has been very constant and very reliable, and probably constant, reliable to a point that some others in the world were astonished that Europe was able to stay together in this way, and we have to continue to work on that. Perhaps I leave it here with mentioning the issues, and I'm happy to go in depth on this or other issues you want to raise. Thank you very much again for the invitation.
So thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Meyer-Landrut. Very challenging introduction on the major challenges in face of the EU, economic challenges, climate and energy challenges, external challenges. It's not easy to find solutions, but maybe together we could find the right solutions. So thank you very much. Certainly there will be questions. I'd like also to mention that our debate is broadcast live on caleeuropana.pro, and I'd like to thank Duncan Bunaru for this opportunity. And as Ambassador Comunescu mentioned, we can ensure simultaneously translation, so you could put your questions in Romanian language or in English. Cum preferați. So the floor is yours now. I would like to invite to present yourself and to address the question.
May I, with your permission, make one brief remark? At least in my thinking, Q&As means also comments. So don't hesitate.
I'd like to welcome the presence here of many distinguished guests from Polish Embassy, certainly from the Embassy of Germany here in Romania. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for being here. From Ukraine Embassy, from Greece Embassy. So I would like to invite you maybe to have some comments, if you wish, certainly. Magdalena Bogdiewicz.
Thank you very much. So Polish Embassy.
So it will be a microphone, I certainly, I hope.
Try to put the question as loud as possible. You mentioned those three areas that you think are most challenging for Europe. I would like to ask, so maybe if you could deliberate a little bit about this third part. And also in the view of the new European security strategy that is being debated now, or the process has just started, and we know it can take 1-2 years. I would be interested in hearing your point of view and the point of view of Germany in this respect. How would you like to draw the main lines? How would you like to see the main lines drawn in this important document? And in general, what's German's point of view on the challenges coming from the east, from the south, and also how this might influence the internal cooperation within the Union?
Thank you. Well, you see, there's always how can I say, the two sides of these discussions. One is the debate about strategies, general strategies, and the other thing is about, so to say, the real day-to-day policy in front of, in face of specific challenges. I must say, at this stage, we are more engaged in the second part of this agenda. And when I look, for example, at the question of Ukraine, I think it's very important that we do both. We support Ukraine in its efforts to stabilize the economy, to progress on the different areas of also in Ukraine national reforms, which are agreed with and elaborated in Ukraine with the International Monetary Fund and with the other donors, which is very important for success in the end. But that we are also supporting as much as we can the diplomatic process to advance political solutions. In the end, there will have to be, and the only way to solve these things are political solutions. And we now have an agreement which was reached in Minsk and which sets out a framework in which the political issues can be addressed. And I think the key priority now must be to support this process in a way that it gathers momentum, that the individual political issues are addressed, and that one sees how solutions can be found. Only a successful political process based on what has been agreed in Minsk can lead to a solution. Now, if I describe this and these principles for this question, this contains a number of elements which I think should also, in a general sense, be part of European foreign policy. I think it's always the necessity to try to help to find political solutions. This will not always go immediately. It will take time. We have to be patient and but continue to work on these political solutions. But we must also be able, if we come to the political conclusion that we disagree with certain developments, that we take together decisions as we had on the sanctions concerning the Russian Federation. This is an important part of the policy. It is not an objective as such. Nobody in the European Union, or less in Germany, is happy about sanctions. But we must be able to demonstrate that we are willing, so to say, to also support our policy by measures. And we have taken, this again, links, I think the link is very important, to demonstrate that there is a relationship between measures we decide and political objectives we pursue, that we have decided in the European Council in March to link the existence of the sanctions to the full implementation of the Minsk package, and thus create this political link, which makes clear that the sanctions are there not to punish anybody or just because we feel it's time to decide on sanctions, but because there's an objective, there's a political solution which we are trying to strive for. So, and then we have to, in every respect and always also take into account what are our, not only what our interests, but also what is our, so to say, value-based system leads us to what kind of appraisals of specific situations. If we're not doing that anymore, we will lose our credibility at home and abroad.
Thank you very much, Dr. Meyer. Simona Soder, next question.
Thank you very much.
I'm confident I can speak loud enough. Simona Soder, Institute for Political Studies of Defense and Military History at the National School for Political Studies and Administration. Well, thank you very much. It was very interesting to get your points of view on where Germany in general sees the European Union heading. But I would have a comment and two questions, if I may. My comment would be, we've had Minsk 1 and Minsk 2, and things aren't stopping or improving in Ukraine. And to that effect, presumably, if Russia decides to do worse in the Donbass area, what is the European Union and Germany prepared to do? And what effects do you think what's going on in Hungary or in Greece and their relationship with Russia right now, what kind of effect that's going to have on the unity and solidarity within the European Union? on, say, more sanctions? Just putting it out there. My second question, actually, this is the first question, refers to Germany's position on the Juncker proposal. And to extrapolate that, Germany's position on the NATO-EU relationship in the military aspect. Where do you see that relationship heading? And what kind of priorities do you think should be approached, especially with the upcoming summit in the summer? And the third aspect had to do with, I'd like to ask you to comment on the Eastern Partnership, because we have the Riga summit coming up. And what would be the main lines you think should be approached during the summit to take the Eastern Partnership forward, if there is any opportunity to do so? And if not, why not? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simona.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I would first start by saying that we are not distinguishing between Minsk I and Minsk II. And it's an important distinction between the two, because Minsk in September last year was agreed between the parties and the countries concerned. And what we achieved in February was an attempt to help implement Minsk and not to replace Minsk I by Minsk II. And this is, in terms of the process we are in, at least from our point of view, important. It's not with the participation of the French President and the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany that we have defined the framework in which a political solution can be found, but we have tried to define a process by which what they had agreed in Minsk might actually get implemented. And so it's for us it's an important distinction. On the question, what if the situation worsens? Well, I think the Chancellor and we all have been very clear that a major, so to say, further operations, military operations, so on, will lead naturally to the question of further sanctions. And I think we have to be clear, and as a European Union, we have to be prepared to, in that case, also respond and react accordingly. Now, I will not tell you what are the individual elements of such a stage which could be implemented then, but as a good administration, I can tell you that we are prepared. And this, I think, politically has been said several times, and this has not been said as an empty expression of something which is based on political consideration and practical preparation. As to the continued unanimity or solidarity within the European Union, you know, this question has been asked to us before the first set of sanctions, before the second set of sanctions, before the third set of sanctions, and it is being asked again. Our experience from the last year is when circumstances arise that such decisions are required, unanimity in the European Union will be achieved. But it is very difficult to discuss in theory what should be done if this or that situation arises. This is divisive, and it is not. It will not lead to any conclusion. So we are not making theoretical debates on under which circumstances, which kind of reactions should be taken, and who would then be, and so on. I understand the interest in the question, but the experience of the last year has actually demonstrated that when the situation required the European Union to react. The European Union has been able to react, and I'm confident that this will continue. On the Juncker proposal, how can I say? It's interesting that the Juncker proposal on the military or on the defense side is the one you are raising. We had hoped that Juncker would spend more time and energy on the economic side than on the defense side, and where we actually have quite considerable European competence and European instruments, and where we support Juncker in his efforts to come to more investment, to come to more growth, to improve, and so on, but can decline the agenda. On the defense side, well, there is a long-standing frustration with EU-NATO relations because of the different memberships and the relationship between Cyprus and Turkey, and this blocking possibilities which we find natural since years, and where we would have hoped for much more intensive cooperation. On the defense side, I think we have to be careful not to overestimate what is possible. The decisions on sending of troops from member states into any military theater will for the foreseeable future remain a national decision. And not because one has a problem with the European Union, but because national constitutions and the responsibility for the Americans would say our boys lie with our politicians and our parliaments. And so it's very difficult, and in this sense, the general expression of a European army creates expectations which I think political reality in Europe for at least the foreseeable future will have difficulties to respond to. But below that level, there is a wide area of possibilities for cooperation in the defense sector, in cooperation between, as you say, EU-NATO, between the different military, different kinds of military units and cooperation. And so I would advocate trying to strengthen this from the bottom and work on the different practical things which can be achieved, but not try to give it a label which actually creates more uncertainty or creates expectations which in reality we will then again have to disappoint the people really think it's an army. On the Riga summit, well, I think the Riga summit has to also take into account what has happened since Vilna. We have to recognize that the Eastern Partnership is something which also has to do with the not immediate, but the next neighbor in the east, with Russia. We cannot do so as if Eastern Partnership is completely, to say, taking place in an empty space where behind the borders of our Eastern partners there's a white space on the map, and we don't know what's happening behind there. So we need to see that. What I think is important is we have signed and we are ratifying with 3 of these countries important cooperation and association and free trade agreements. We have been negotiating 6 years these agreements. We have been deciding under difficult circumstances to sign and to ratify them. The center of the future development of our relations with these countries must be the implementation of these agreements. And this perhaps looks not very, or does not sound very sexy, implementation of an agreement, but it actually is a huge program also to support modernization of these countries. And so I would very much favor an approach which would perhaps also be more down to earth, but real, and look into the possibilities of step-by-step implementation in the different areas of this agreement. They cover a huge range of topics. We have postponed the provisional application of the trade provisions, but there are many other provisions, and they are very important in terms of cooperation. So let's get practical.
Okay, next question, Dezbatere.
Well, thank you very much for your excellent exposé. I'm Petre, Romanian Diplomatic Institute. Well, I want to move a little bit south with, in fact, two questions. One is very short, but I think the answer is not so simple. It's what's going to happen with Turkey in our European way. And second, we have, as Europeans, a great victory with the Iran agreement, Ladies Ashton's and then High Rep Mogherini's role in keeping Iran at the table was essential. But on the other hand, what we are seeing is a huge axis of instability coming from North Syria to the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, with Yemen being engulfed in an internal strife. So what can or what should the European Union do? Now it's more or less managed locally, but I don't think that on a long-term basis it's a sound solution. Thank you very much.
Well, on Turkey, we have in place accession negotiations with Turkey since in the autumn it will be 10 years. I was there at the first opening in October 2005. People were in the beginning expecting a negotiation which would be dynamic, which would lead us into a situation where we would have to decide rather quickly whether, in spite of some political difficulties, we would come to the conclusion of these negotiations. I think the last 10 years have shown and told us a different story. Progress is slow. At this stage, progress is basically stalled. We have not opened chapters now for quite some time. What I think is very important when we look into this question is to be careful to define what is the reason for this situation. And there is a part of the story out there which says this negotiations are not progressing because the Europeans are not interested. I think this is at best half of the story. We, for example, have at least 3 chapters in the negotiations which, from the European side, we would be willing to open, and where, on the Turkish side, the preconditions for opening have over years not been fulfilled for internal political reasons. So the accession process as such was and is and remains an important vehicle in our relations, and also in the process in Turkey in terms of modernizing the country and so on. But well, there is also a moment where Turkey will have to reply to the question whether the overall obligations coming with full memberships are obligations with Turkey is willing to contract. And this is a question which you cannot avoid at the end of the debate. We are not there yet, but it should not be, how can I say, hidden behind issues like Cyprus and other issues. So we want strong and developing relationships with Turkey, but these negotiations pose at least as much a question to Turkey as it poses to the European Union. On the Iran agreement, well, it's the start of an agreement. There is still a lot of work which needs to be done until the summer. We need to keep the process on track and really come to a conclusion. That would be extremely important, that these kind of processes can derail at the last moment, and that would be very detrimental. So let us together with the European Union and the individual countries concerned concentrate on this. On the wider issues from Yemen to Syria, Iraq, and so on, there is also a point where Europe has to recognize its limitations. We need to contribute, we need to try to do what we can. Basically, in these conflicts, you see individual member states participating one way or the other in different kinds of coalitions of the willing, and particularly, of course, as much as military action is concerned. The European Union will need to continue to define a political approach. We'll try to help to define this, but there are things where Europe alone will not solve the problems, so we will have to work with the Americans and others. And so let's somehow, my priority would be to try to deal with the issues which we can solve also, and where our contribution can be decisive.
Thank you very much, Dr. Meyer-Landrut. And now I would like to take advantage of my quality as moderator and focus a bit from security challenges to economic challenges, because I think we have to have a balanced debate. And you have mentioned that economic recovery is still weak, and we know that a real economic recovery should be supported, among others, by important flow of investments, public and private. And in this context, my question is, how could we accommodate the need to revigorate the economic growth with technical restrictions imposed by Stability and Growth Pact? And I have in mind the budget deficit limit. Thank you.
Well, the question is very simple. There is enough private money around. If Europe is able to create the right regulatory framework and the right structures for private investment to take place, it will take place. And we will not be able to replace private investment by public spending. So we are relatively, public spending has to do its part, but public spending will not be the solution to the investment problems in Europe. We need to create at the national and at the European level the right environment which is investment and business friendly, and which leads to more private investment. when you look at what the central bank is doing, when you, and we don't comment that, when you look at what happens in stock exchange markets, you see that there is a huge amount of private capital looking for investment. And if we are not attractive enough for private investment, we will not be able to replace that by public spending. So the Growth and Stability Pact and fiscal, what we would call fiscal seriousness, is not an obstacle to investment, but is a precondition for sound and long-term investment. We need to do the right things at the national levels. This is in many cases labor market reforms. It is in many cases product market reforms. It is in many cases the improvement of public administration, justice, fight against corruption, and things like that, which will definitely increase the investment environment for private investment. And if the other point is that the more you do in economic terms through public investment, you will probably only crowd out private capital and not create more opportunities. So it's I know it's a more it takes perhaps more time. It's perhaps more cumbersome. It is, but we will all not get around addressing these issues, which, by the way, in most of the cases do not cost money. They can even save money. So it's to create the right conditions for investment is not something which is, in most cases, something which requires public expenditure.
Thank you very much. A new question, Vlado Buto, Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you. I'm the desk officer for Germany in the Foreign Affairs Ministry. And since Mrs. Dragan has brought the discussion into the economic field, I would like to keep it here. And I would be interested in your assessment on the capacity of Greece to carry on and implement the reforms which are being required of it from its international creditors. More precisely, I would be interested in the impact that its future actions will have on the whole economic construct of the EU in general, on the security aspect, because that's also a matter which is being discussed. And if you could provide us a best case scenario and a worst case scenario, if that's not too much. Thank you.
Well, I will not provide you the worst case scenario. I don't think that's what we are aiming for. So the negotiations between the Greek authorities and the institutions are taking place right now. We, as a German government, are not part of these negotiations, and we cannot, at a national level, define what exactly the reform requirements are and how they have to be, let's say, put together so that there is a comprehensive and meaningful reform package. What we are asking the institutions and the Greek authorities, that is, to come up with a comprehensive package which can then be assessed by the institutions in a comprehensive way, which can open the way for the conclusion of the ongoing review. And now, in these kind of negotiations, the different elements of a reform package can change, and that is normal. And if there is there are new political priorities, these new political priorities can be reflected in such an overall approach. But the overall approach must be sustainable. We must have a reliable economic baseline scenario. We must understand what the baseline scenario is. We must have sustainable fiscal path for the coming years. Not individual measures, but an overall assessment. And if there is more expenditure on one side and resources are limited, perhaps there have to be less expenditures on another side. So it's a trade-off, and we have to see the overall package. If there is more social expenditure, there is perhaps a requirement to either have more income or to have less expenditure at another place. And for the time being, we are waiting for such a comprehensive approach and its assessment, evaluation by the institutions. And the only point which I'm making is that this is a relatively complex process, that this is technically and politically not easy, and that the urgency for the weak authorities, together with the institutions, to come up with such a thing is increasing day by day. But we will not take a judgment. We will not take a judgment before we are confronted with such a scenario. There is no, the idea which one hears once in a while, that's to say some measures can lead to some disbursement, doesn't work. Because only if we have a comprehensive understanding of the situation, we can present that to our constituencies and have the necessary decisions being ratified in Germany. So time is of the essence now. I think Madame Lagarde has said yesterday, it's now all about work, and I can only subscribe to that.
Thank you very much. A new question?
My name is Nikolaus from Pan-Europa Foundation and also from German Center of Competitiveness. In a few days, on 25th of April, we shall celebrate 10 years since Romania signed this accession treaty to the European Union. If you could indicate at least two strengths of Romanian membership and also two weaknesses. Two weaknesses, two, three, as many as you like, but some important point. Don't say that we don't have weaknesses. The second question concerns the German model. I think that Germany represents a very successful social and economic models, as it's seen by all the statistics. The exports grew tremendously. You are positive always. You have positive, excessive balance of payments. In the global competitiveness index, you are approaching the top position every year, at least 1-2 position up, which is very interesting. Compared to the neighbors of your country, for example, for France, you are doing better, much better. And there are also severe critics towards such position of Germany, that it is a deliberate movement to occupy the market. How do you comment this position of the German economy, a German model, economic and social, in the European Union. And the third concerned the monetary union. In Romania, at least at the academic level, there is a criticism about the way in which the Eurozone, Euro in general, were conceived at the birth, the conception. For example, there was no banking union, no fiscal union, no political union, no common budget. I think that such an approach is not the most appropriate. To have a joint budget, a common budget of all member countries of the European Union will not be then but idealistic position, not utopian, not to say utopian. Banking union at this point is just institutional mechanism for implementing, according to my opinion, the CRD4 and Basel III agreements. The fiscal union, I don't speak about it, and the political union, I think, is not the time, the appropriate time to speak about it now. Even if at the level of the European Union, the intergovernmental political dialogue is functioning very well. What do you think about such an opinion about the imperfections of the European Union monetary union construction? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Iordan Bărbulescu. Very long list of questions. Maybe
Sorry.
we need a conference to give answer to all of that, but we'll try.
I will try. I start with the German model and balance of payments and surpluses. Well, first of all, I wouldn't qualify them as excessive, but that's probably my point of view. Secondly, I think it's important to be more detailed in the analysis than most of the observers are. When you look at the German balance of payments and their developments over the last years, actually the position compared to the other member states within the euro area is not excessive, even by the standards of commentators. It's 2 or 3%, and it has been decreasing over the last years. So the argument that the German surplus is a problem of imbalance within the monetary union is just wrong. Most of the German surplus is achieved outside the European Union and not within the European Union, even less within the monetary union. So if one looks at the figures, one has to look at it precisely before one draws conclusions where and what kind of effects it has. The second point, which is important when we look at the wider European Union, the balance of payments of the European Union as a whole, or the Eurozone as a whole, is relatively balanced. And it is balanced due to the fact that some parts of the European Union are exporting more and others are exporting less. In the German exports, and that is the third point, much of this is actually a combination of Europe-wide economic efforts. Because if a German car is exported, much of the elements which go into this car have been produced somewhere else in Europe. Not least in Romania, but also in the Czech Republic, in the Slovak Republic, in Slovenia, and so on. So if you part of the German success, and which is attributed to the German balance of payment, is actually, at least partially, a European export. And so, so when we look into these figures, it's one needs to be careful in the analysis before one blames an individual country as having an excessive imbalance within the union, and to see what is the basis. And for us, you know, The economic success of Europe will depend in the coming years whether Europe continues to be able to sell its goods and services outside Europe. Pascal Lamy, when he was still head of the World Trade Organization, explained to us that in the coming years, 90% of worldwide growth will be outside Europe. 90%. If we want to be part of that growth, we have to be able to export into these markets. And the competition, the worldwide competition, is something which is taking place beyond Europe. So there are once in a while debates in Europe where we compare each other too much, so to say, from a European internal point of view, and where we are not sufficiently looking at the wider challenges. Now, as to our neighbors, we are confident that they know what challenges they are facing, and we are confident that they know what measures they have to take to improve their competitiveness. This holds true for Italy, it's true for France. This is always politically complicated processes within the individual member states, and we will not comment on these processes. And there have been times where, and it's not so long ago, where international media, Anglo-Saxon media, were describing Germany as the sick man in Europe, and then Germany, in quite a long and complicated process, has done a number of reforms, and so there will always be cycles, and Germany will be back also in a weaker position if Germany is not continuing its reform works, and so I'm not so worried about cyclical developments on that question. On the monetary union, I agree with you that the monetary union, as it was conceived in the Treaty of Maastricht, is an interesting construction in which we have created a monetary and economic union with a federalized monetary policy and a very weak coordination or integration of economic policies. We have left, when we were defining these policies, economic policies, basically to member states. Now this can work under the assumption that member states, when taking their national decisions on economic and financial policies, take into account their responsibility for the wider monetary union in which they live. The first 10 years of the monetary union have proven that this has not always been the case to full extent, to be polite. Now, this, I think, is a point out of which we have to draw a conclusion, and where we have to continue to work on how cooperation in the economic policy area within the monetary union has to be and needs to be deepened. On banking union, I think we have done more than what you described. I think very important is the supervision, and very important is the agreed rules and the European mechanism on banking resolution, because that creates a much stronger framework. We had before the financial crisis a situation in Europe where we had a European-wide financial market which developed, but a supervision which was fragmented at national level, and that couldn't work. And so we have done here quite a lot. The fiscal on the fiscal side, we have a budget of the European Union. It's perhaps smaller than in other areas. We have to make better use of this money, and yes, we will continue to have to discuss how to improve also the fiscal cooperation. On the political union, I must say it's an interesting debate, because what is a political union? Is the political union the cooperation on economic and these issues? Then I would say we are very close to a political union. Is the political union the establishment of a federal state of Europe? Then we might be relatively far away from it. So I would also here favor a more pragmatic approach and deal with the real issues than to have a debate on are we having a political union, yes or no. I don't see for the foreseeable future a big jump to a federal state. Now we can think personally or institutionally that this in the end is where we should end up, but it will not be achieved by un saut qualitatif within a short period of time. Now I haven't said anything on the strengths and on the weakness of Romania. I will not speak about the weaknesses, as I don't speak about negative scenarios. I think the strength of Romania is that it's very important for all of us to understand better also the point of views on certain regional and other issues from the Romanian point of view. There is not least, for example, in the Ukrainian situation, it's very important to have the contribution from here to this debate. You have a different history, you have a different understanding, you have a different relationship with these countries, and this is enriching and helps Europe to better understand and define its policies in these areas. So we think that there are many areas in which we can very usefully cooperate. I think I mentioned almost.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your answer. The last two questions, because we try to respect the agenda. Gabriela Prețu, Romania Parliament.
Thank you very much. Gabriela Prețu, European Affairs Committee of the Senate.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here and sharing with us your points of view. Being the rapporteur on economic governance, European semester, and so on, I have to admit that I am not very optimistic on how has worked by now the European three pillars approach. That means fiscal consolidation, structural, especially labor market reforms, and recently European strategic investments. For at least two reasons, I tell you. Would effectiveness, after 4 years of implementation, we cannot see the results, and weak legitimacy, in spite of all efforts for strengthening it. As a parliamentarian, I am interested very much in. I cannot help myself to notice that we use a kind of double standard. There are bad debts, public debts, of course, and good debts, private ones. Starting with the Juncker investment plan, we have introduced good investments, privately driven but publicly supported, and bad investments, public ones, because undermining fiscal consolidation. Do you foresee any significant change in the future in order to go on with this approach? The first question. And the second one, very short one. Which are your first three favorite sources of energy for the future?
Thank you, Mrs. Prețu. Thank you very much. And the last question, maybe I can take the book.
No, ask your question.
The other question. Meyer-Landrut is.
There's another one over there.
No, it's another one.
Okay.
My name is I'm from Meyer Foundation, also Academy of Economic Studies. And because I'm academic, may raise some unusual question. And that would be, how would you characterize nowadays the relation between France and Germany, which historically have been the engine of economic integration? And if I may make a further comment, because you are an advisor to a conservative chancellor, how is Germany dealing with differences in economic policy approaches from other governments in Europe? For example,
we have a big coalition.
Like a socialist government in France, yes? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Muszewski. And the last question.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Matthias Biel from the British Institute, and I have a question regarding the rule of law. We spoke today a lot about fiscal policies and economic policies, and I think there is a bit of a strange situation at the moment in the European Union in the sense that there are quite differentiated instruments to monitor fiscal and budgetary policies of the member states, but there are almost no instruments to monitor the situation when it comes to the rule of law and when it comes to compliance to democratic standards. Now, Romania is an exception in this sense because it's one of the two countries that have the cooperation and verification mechanism. So this issue is obviously controversially discussed here. If it's a very selective instrument, why it's only applied to Romania, how long shall it continue, and so on. Obviously, there's also a lot of discussion here in Romania about what is going on in neighboring Hungary. And to my knowledge, there is now an initiative at the European Council to introduce a mechanism for monitoring the rule of law, both in old and new member states likewise. So my question would be if you can shed a little bit light on this process, if you're confident that there will be such a monitoring tool in the future, and if so, how strong it will be. And since I have the last question, since no one asked anything about climate, it was your second main challenge that you outlined for the European Union, maybe you can say a few words about what are your expectations when it comes to the Paris summit, and also when it comes to defining the post-2020 climate targets for the European Union and the potentially binding instruments for achieving them for the individual member states. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, on the European semester, I share your frustration on the European semester. It's the expression that actually the instruments on economic coordination which we currently have under the treaties are too weak. We have recommendations, and countries deal with these recommendations as you also personally do when you get recommendations. You fulfill a recommendation if you agree with the recommendation. If you don't like the recommendation, you forget about the recommendation. And when you look at it in a wider sense, statistically, you see that about 90% of the country-specific recommendations coming out of the European semester Europe-wide are not applied by. So clearly, this is not really working as it should work. My advice would be to think again about the system. I think the system is too it's not enough. It's not political enough, and it's not focused enough. I think a country which gets 9 country-specific recommendations of major reforms for 1 year in 9 policy areas, like some of the countries had recently, it's for a political system impossible to implement. It would not work. So, but on the other hand, of course, the Commission making up the 9 recommendations is probably intellectually honest and notes all the different areas in which something has to be done. But it's not giving these things a sense of priority. So we need to come to a system where between the European level and the member states we have an honest and political debate about which are the most important reforms, and which of these most important reforms the country politically is willing to take along. And then we come into something where we create focus, priority, but also ownership. And I think we really need to work on this more. On investment and debt, I don't think there is good debt or bad debt. We should not try to distinguish in public debt between what is good and what is bad. We should try to live within the framework which we have all agreed to. And on investment, so to say, criteria to decide whether investment is good or bad is whether it's productive or not. And of course, there are things which the state has to spend money because it is required for the functioning of the state. It is required for infrastructure and things like that, and it's not directly, you cannot directly draw from it financial benefits, and that the states should do and will have to do. But I think the states should more invest in the question of how to improve the environment for investment than to try to, without changing the environment, compensating for the lack of private investment through additional public investment. Not that it's bad or good investment, but it will over time not be sustainable. It will not work. It will only work for a short moment. It can be it can help a bit, but it will not solve the underlying problems. On France and Germany, the three sources of energy. Sorry, the three sources of energy. Well, member states will have to, and this is, I think, also right. So, will have to decide on the energy mix themselves, and we should not, as a European Union, define what is the proper energy mix for individual countries. We have in Germany part of the renewable energy which is increasing very, very fast, which also requires to adapt the infrastructure accordingly, which is not always an easy enterprise. And renewable energy is fluctuating and has also its difficulties for industrial sites and so on. So we need to develop that. And then, over time, I mean, we still have coal. We have a big debate in Germany about how much of this is too dirty and how much of this is clean enough that you can maintain it. And we will continue to have gas for the foreseeable future, one way or the other. We have decided in Germany to replace nuclear by these kind of energetic sources. But again, this is a national decision which I think we should not try to export. But both the modernization of coal and the proper use of renewables are both important, I think, for most of our countries, also in terms of increasing energy efficiency, of reducing CO2 emissions, and so there is a commonality in the challenge. France and Germany, you see, the cooperation is extremely dense. The cooperation is very good. The public perception of the cooperation varies much more than the reality of the political cooperation is. So if the reality of political cooperation is like this, the public perception is like this. And I can't change it. If we agree on something, we are criticized as why are France and Germany telling the others what they should do. If we are not agreeing on something, we are told, why can't you at last come to a common position because you can't advance because you don't agree. So I will always try to work on bringing France and Germany's positions closer to each other, but it is not an exclusive exercise. And I think in today's European Union, an agreement or commonality of approach between France and Germany is a precondition for a European position, but it's not sufficient for a European position. I think we have to also, as France and Germany, understand that limitation and take it as a starting point to discuss with others. And others should also then bring their point of view to the table. Rule of law is, in the end, also regarding the country north from here, you mentioned the only instrument which really works is when we come to the point where there are Vertragsverletzungsverfahren, when there are procedures concerning the non-application of treaty or EU law, and the difficulty is that there are areas in which we have extensive European legislation, and there are other areas in which we have much less European legislation. And of course, for example, on constitutional reforms and on constitutional law, there is no European norm, and so it's not such an easy exercise. But I think over the last years, the awareness that we need to deal with these things more has improved and has been strengthened, and we will continue to do that. On the climate, well, I think the success of Paris at the end of the year is to be achieved before the final conference gathers. I think we have learned from Copenhagen, which was a disaster, that if we try to negotiate these things in substance at the final stage, there will be actors who will not move anymore on the ground. Even for the European Union, it's very difficult because they have had a very complex decision making before. So somebody representing the European Union cannot all of a sudden say, well, I add 5%. And the same is true for the United States, the same is true for China, and so on. So I think we need to work with these countries now. We need to come to as much an engagement as possible, but we should also not create expectations which in the end are unfulfillable. For the European Union, we have defined in October last year our framework at the European Council with the different strands. We think that the emission trade scheme and its modernization is very important, also to lead these things into more market-oriented dimensions. And then we will have to do the distribution on the non-ETS. I would recommend to deal with the non-ETS after Paris and not before Paris. It will be sufficiently divisive. One should not display this European game before Paris. We'll have to do it afterwards, and in the end we will manage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nikolaus Meyer-Landrut, for your very honest and comprehensive answers. Maybe our debate could continue, but unfortunately agenda constraints oblige us to stop here with questions, but I would like to give the possibility to intervene here. Mr. Romanescu.
Thank you very much. Actually, what I wanted to say, it's a half comment, half question. It's very brief. The other week I was attending a debate here in Bucharest, and the occasion was the presentation of a book about risk developments in the European Union. And one comment thereof was that Germany goes towards favoring intergovernmentalism to the detriment of the community method. And I felt the need to intervene, to just say that one shouldn't confuse between dealing intergovernmentally with issues where there are no European competencies. That is something detrimental to the community method. I just wanted to hear from you on that.
Yeah. there are people using the word community method with two different concepts. Concept number one is your and my concept. There is community procedure where there is community competence. And I have no problem whatsoever to follow community rules in areas where the power has been transferred by the treaties to the community level. Trade, common market, whatever. There's a second definition of community method, which is, of course, less explicit and more political, which is Europe is well advancing, the power is vested with the European Parliament and the European Commission, independently whether competences have already been transferred or not. So it is the perspective of extending and giving more powers to the institution. This is something which I'm happy to discuss, but I'm only happy to discuss on the basis of treaty change. Then, of course, we can transfer more power to the institutions. And Germany is one of the few countries over the last years have argued for treaty change. But to extend power without extending the basis from which, what is not yet transferred to the community resides with member states, is in the hands of national parliaments. National parliaments can, through ratification of treaties, in the German case with a two-thirds majority, transfer this power to the community level. Then let's do it. But then let's do it openly. Then let's do it the way it is foreseen, and not do it by we want to deal as the institutions with areas for which we have no competence because we are the better Europeans. So then I'm well.
So this was the last question and last comment. And now I would like to invite Mr. Leonard Orban for not a very easy task, for final remarks. Just a few words about the European resume of Mr. Orban, sorry.
It's so long.
It's very long, okay, so it will be quite difficult to say.
We
just
don't have enough time.
You don't have enough time, yes, I'm sure that. But I have to say that we have here the first Romanian European Commissioner. We have a former Minister of European Affairs, a former Minister of European Funds, former Deputy and Chief Negotiator of Romanian accession to the EU, and I could continue, so I will stop here because you don't have time, and I would like to invite you to present us.
I will be very brief because unfortunately we have time constraints. First of all, I would like to thank you to Dr. Meyer-Landrut for his excellent contribution to the debate on EU affairs here in Romania. It was really an excellent moment for everybody, an excellent debate, and I'm very pleased that we were able to organize such kind of debate today. I'm also very pleased that Dr. Meyer-Landrut didn't answer in a very diplomatic way. And I really very much appreciate this. I know how difficult it is for you to answer openly to some questions. You are one of the highest of position in Germany. You are very close to Chancellor Merkel. Your contributions are reflected on day by day. I know very well how difficult it is for you to answer openly to solve such very complicated and sensitive issues, but I'm very pleased that you did it, and you did it excellently. You covered a large variety of subjects, and this clearly shows how difficult it is to be an advisor on EU affairs. So you have to cover very technical issues like climate change, like energy union, like, I don't know, EMU, but also very political issues. You have to cover also external affairs, enlargement, but also other areas. You have to be also from a legal point of view very how to say, able to understand the sensitivities and the different aspects, and you have to know very well the EU treaty. So it's very complicated, but I'm really very grateful to your contribution. And I would like to conclude just by saying one issue. I'm very pleased that you are here. I'm very pleased that we succeeded to have excellent we have an excellent debate, to have excellent discussions on different subjects of interest, not only on bilateral issues, but also on the issues interesting at the European level. What I would like to say is that I'm really grateful to Germany, to the Federal Republic of Germany, because I have a very long experience in EU affairs, and I know very well the exceptionally contribution of Germany to the unity of the European Union. In spite of many forces, in spite of many stakeholders, in spite of the position of some member states, Germany was and is a supporter of the inclusiveness of the whole process of decision-making process of the European level. I will give you just one example. Now we are debating about the strengthening the EMU. A new report will be presented in June and will be discussed in the next meeting of the European Council. Everybody is participating to this debate. So everybody, all the member states are at the table when the report is discussed. Of course, at the end will be a contribution of 4 presidents. But however, everybody is at the table presenting the opinions about this very complicated and highly political subject. It's just an example. But I have many, many examples. And once again, I would like to say that this position of the Germany, supporting the unity, maintaining the unity of the European Union, is extremely important for Romanian authorities, for Romanian side, and I hope and I'm convinced that this position will be maintained also in the future. Thank you very much for your presence here. Thank you very much for your contribution to the EU debate in Romania.
So now it's very easy for me to say that we had an excellent debate today, to address my thanks to the audience, because there were very, very interesting and intelligent questions. To address my thanks, my only thanks to Dr. Nikolaus Meyer-Landrut for his outstanding intervention during our debate, and to address my thanks to Romanian presidential administration, specifically to Mr. Lazar Comanescu for supporting us in organizing this debate. Thank you very much all, and we are looking forward to having you here, maybe for a next debate, because there are still many, many open questions in the air. Thank you very much.